We'll start today's program on how to get there from here, a colloquium on education. And I'm sure you'll all be knowing what we're all talking about as we go, and we'll have a lot of question and answers. May I invite Neeta Bujra ji to give the green certificate to Professor Ved Prakash ji, UGC Chairperson. We grow and plant trees in your name, which you can see also on the website. Can I invite Niharika Sondi to give the green certificate to Professor Jonathan Gill, Harris, Dean of Academic Affairs and Professor of English at Ashoka University. I'd now like to invite Past President Malvika Rai to give the green certificate to Ms. Niharika Sondi, the Education Consultant, and giving the corporate vision to this discussions today. We are starting the program. Madhu Trehan has got stuck in the traffic jam, but we are going to start off the program and she'll join us when she comes in. May I invite Neeta Bujra, Floor President, to give her welcome address and also introduce the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Professor Ved Prakash, UGC Chairman, Professor Jonathan Gill Harris, Dean of Academic Affairs and Professor of English at Ashoka University, Ms. Niharika Sondi, Educational Consultant and Flow Member, members on the dais, Malvika Rai, Past President Flow, and the governing body members of Flow, Flow members, distinguished guests, and friends from the media. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this vibrant colloquium on education, which is aptly titled, How to Get There from Here. But before I begin, a few housekeeping points. We have pleasure in informing you that an MOU for an exclusive Women Entrepreneur Park has been signed between FICCI and the Telangana State Industrial Investment Corporation for 50 acres of earmarked land in Hyderabad. An exclusive Flow mobile app will be with you shortly to make all the information available to you at the press of a button. And we invite all the Flow members for the launch of the Flow Indoor chapter on the 10th of December, emails you would be using subsequently, and for the interstate meet at Jaipur from 15th to 17th December. Today, we have a very eminent panel of experts amongst us to enlighten us on the Indian education system, opportunities available globally, preparing for challenges of the real world. When I talk about how to get there from here, I mean how to get to the epitome of success in the real world from our current education system, where skilled workforce is a big challenge. What we are lacking is a skilled workforce of a global standard, along with emphasis on the basic foundation of education, which is based on values, ethics, and integrity. I would like to quote American author Robin Cook. Education is more than a luxury. It is a responsibility that the society owes to itself. We all would definitely agree to this statement, as it validates the true significance of education. Education is definitely a very powerful tool to empower ourselves to evolve as active participants in the transformation of the society and the nation at large. The higher education scene in India has definitely undergone a plethora of changes in the current times. According to a recent report by Ernst & Young titled Higher Education in India, Vision 2030. By 2030, India will be amongst the youngest nations in the world, with nearly 140 million people in the college age going group. 1 in every 4 graduates in the world will be a product of the Indian higher education system. This is very encouraging. However, there are several concerns that we harbor about the present state of the Indian education system. The dearth of quality institution, the gap between skills required and the skills imparted, the shortage of expert educators, and the paucity of options after graduation are the key concerns which need to be addressed. In today's session, we'll also discuss some of these pertinent factors which will contribute significantly in leveraging the higher education scenario in India. It is my privilege to introduce the distinguished panelists for today's session. Professor Ved Prakash is the chairman of the University Grants Commission. As a policy maker and the head of APEX, body for the selection, accreditation and sustenance of higher education in India, Professor Ved Prakash has the omniscience of all aspects in education. His insight comes from being a powerhouse faculty in the world's most sought-after institutions. Thank you, sir, for taking out time and joining us today. Professor Jonathan Gill Harris is Dean of Academic Affairs and Professor of English at Ashoka University. A native of New Zealand, he completed his doctoral studies in the UK at the University of Sussex and taught for 23 years in the US, most recently at George Washington University, where he was also associate editor of Shakespeare Quarterly. The author of 6 books on Shakespeare and early modern culture, Professor Harris's most recent book, The First Firangis, How to Be Authentically Indian Before the British Raj, will be published this December. Ms. Niharika Sondhi is an educational consultant as also an active flow member. Having experienced education from India, UK and the USA, from disciplines as varied as design to business, Ms. Sondhi has been an independent counselor for more than a decade. Prior to being an independent counselor, Niharika Sondhi has been instrumental in starting several colleges in various disciplines. Her experience in counseling students, not only from India, but from across the world, gives her a unique perspective about the changing demands of students and their apprehensions about the higher education experience. Thank you, Niharika, for coordinating this program so beautifully and being a moderator as well as a panelist. Let us make the best of this opportunity today to empower ourselves with the right knowledge in order to make the right decisions and help shape the future of the future generation and the nation at large. Over to you, Niharika.
Thank you, Nita, for those kind words.
Thank you, Nita, for those kind words. When we talk about, when I had to decide on the session on education, it was very, very difficult to come up with the right topic. What am I trying to say here? What is going to be the takeaway from this session? So the topic came out to be how to get there from here. Now, it could be a little confusing to a lot of people, but this topic was important because we need to prepare ourselves today for tomorrow. When we talk about here, we talk about what is the current situation of our education system. How can we make it better to achieve their goals through a successful education system that focuses not only on gaining departmentalized knowledge, but growth in areas of skill and attitude to make us strong contributors to the social and the economic growth of a country. Here, we are in a position when none of our universities are among the top 200 ranked universities as per times higher education, even though we have a strong pool of intellectual property. Economic Times, as per Economic Times, 47% of our graduates are not employable for any industry role, as per the latest report by employability solution firm Aspiring Minds. This based on a pan-India of 60,000 graduates across the country. I just want to mention, I was reading it somewhere, that as per Gary Coleman, he's the MD of Global Industries in Dallas, USA. He says that India has a large workforce of 500 million people with 10 million added every year. And still business houses find it difficult to find adequately skilled manpower for their needs. So we have jobs, people who want jobs and jobs who want people. When we talk about by 2030, India expects to be the fastest growing economy, touching a GDP of $10 trillion and one of the youngest nations in the world with a median age of 32. The growing developed world expects to face an employable talent shortage of approximately 56 million by 2030. They all are looking at India for that skilled force. Why? Because our Indian youth are going to be at that age which can serve the global market. So basically, every 4 graduate in the world could be an Indian, a skilled Indian. Today, our program is going to focus on the glitches and the gaps in our education system, the reforms that are underway with the new government that will improve the system such that we can produce global, knowledgeable, and skilled professionals of tomorrow. I'm honored today that we have the UGC chairperson, and of course Ms. Madhusrehan will be here shortly, and Professor Gil Harris, to give their perspectives on the area of being educated instead of being schooled, so that the students can move on, are prepared to move on to the industry with the right skills. This question I'd like to ask, just a minute. Professor Ved Prakash, would you like to say a few words before I ask you some questions?
Get into the question and answer session straight away. I don't mind getting into the audience.
You would like to say a few words about our education system before I can ask you the questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Very good afternoon to all of you. Professor Jonathan Gay from Ashoka University, Ms. Neeta, Ms. Niharika, Ms. Archana, Ms. Manju Kalra, distinguished participants in this colloquium, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a matter of great honor and a very special privilege to be with you this afternoon. I do not know whether Neeta and Niharika have served you good lunch, because they didn't invite me. And if you have had sumptuous lunch, then some of you are going to go to sleep. And I will try to wake you up. This is one problem to address the illustrious audience in the afternoon. And the another problem is that when you are addressing a very informed audience, the speaker at times can speak on the strength of his ignorance, thinking that the informed audience will pardon him. So with this Let me congratulate the organizers of this program, and more so for choosing this very apt theme, how to get there from here. And unless you know where do you stand today, it may not be appropriate for you to set the goal for yourselves. Where do you want to see yourselves in 5 years from hence? Most of the time we keep criticizing ourselves, we keep lamenting, and that is the right way of proper progress. I am not averse to that, but let me tell you that we are a great nation, and in the last 68 years we have traversed a long distance. We had only 210,000 primary schools in this country. Today we have 748,000 primary schools. And some of you, particularly the younger girls, would be surprised to know that we had only 14,000 upper primary schools in 1948. And today we have 447,000 upper primary schools. And we had only 7,000 secondary and senior secondary institutions in 1950-51, and today we have 259,000 secondary and senior secondary institutions in our country. When Britishers left, they left behind only 20 universities and 500 colleges. Today we have 700 universities and 38,000 colleges. Not only that, in terms of the literacy rate, we were only having 18% literacy rate after independence, and today we are touching 72% literacy rate. So the point that I am trying to make here is that we have done fairly well, but the numbers are our real big problem. And there are umpteen problems before us in the sector of education. I think we may not be having time if I give you a very critical analysis of the entire system. What we need to do is that we need to reflect on 4 different aspects. One is we need to know where do we stand today. I have given you a very shallow picture of that, as to what has worked and what has not worked. And then the third thing, what you should do is that where do you want to reach from here, and when you are moving forward, what should be the guiding principles. That should be the correct kind of analysis in any endeavor, be it education or be it in the industry. Now, as you know that we are the second most populous country in the world, and that we have the third largest pool of scientists in this country, and that 11 colleagues of ours are working with CERN. So you will find very bright minds involved in different kinds of research activities, teaching and learning activities all over the world. But the problem remains that we are, insofar as higher education is concerned, I am not going to touch upon the school education, but insofar as higher education is concerned, the problem before us is that very small number of children are entering into the portals of higher education. Of the total number of children in the age cohort of 18 to 22, which happens to be 119.4 million, only 24 million children are enrolled in the sector of higher education. Which means that the gross enrollment ratio in higher education is only 21%, which is much lesser than the world average, which happens to be 32%, much lesser than the developed world. And if you go by the classification of Martin, though we do not very often talk about universalization of higher education in the higher education sector, But Martin has given some kind of a classification, and he said that if a country is below 15, then it belongs to the elite stage of development of higher education. If a country is between 15 to 50, then it belongs to the massification stage of higher education. And if a country has crossed the 50% gross enrollment ratio, then that country has universalized higher education. That is the definition, which is not a very, very popular definition, but that is the definition given by Martin. So we are in the block of massification of higher education. We have massified higher education, and higher education in our country is now no longer the monopoly of elites. Higher education is not at the periphery of the national development agenda. Higher education is at the center stage. And in the 11th five-year plan, for the first time, we have made massive investment in higher education. We have come up for the first time with 451 public institutions of higher learning. We have never ever added so many public institutions in one planned period, which we have added there. But if you look at the gross enrollment of the ratio of the countries which are usually compared with us, like China, in China the gross enrollment ratio is 25%. In Brazil it is 26%. Russia, of course, is much higher, that is 76%. And countries like United States of America and Great Britain are far ahead of us. The point is, what are the kinds of challenges before us? And if you have challenges in any endeavor, then you also have the opportunities. So it depends upon you, how are you going to convert those challenges into opportunities. One of the biggest challenges before us is the expansion of higher educational facilities in our country. In our country, you may be surprised, you have pockets wherein the gross enrollment ratio is as high as in the developed part of Europe. But then you also have pockets wherein the gross enrollment ratio is abysmally poor. You have states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, wherein the gross enrollment ratio is lesser than 10%. But you have places like Chandigarh, though it's a very small place, but the gross enrollment ratio is 53%. So there are regional variations insofar as access to higher education is concerned. So this is one problem which we have to address. Then, in terms of number of educational institutions in the higher education sector, you have states wherein the total number of higher educational institutions per 100,000 population is as high as 32. But then you also have pockets in our country wherein the total number of higher educational institutions per 100,000 population is as low as 7. Again, the states like West Bengal, Odisha, and Jharkhand. Then you also have the problem of the social imbalances in the sector of higher education. Every institution is not adequately represented by every section of the society. If you look at the participation rates of girls in higher education, it is not much lesser than that of boys. There are states wherein the girls are outranking boys, like the state of Punjab, like the state of Tamil Nadu. But then you also have states wherein the participation rates of girls is much lesser than boys in higher education. And if you talk in terms of so-called progressive domains of knowledge, then you find that their participation rate is still lesser in those market-oriented and high premium domains of knowledge. Similarly, if you look at the participation rates of the minor